2023 was the year that I came back to Pokemon after a 20-year break, and I spent most of that 2 decades playing Magic the Gathering, and I guess like working jobs and being married and paying bills and stuff, but mostly, if I'm being honest, playing Magic the Gathering, which is a slow game of incremental value and interaction. So you can imagine when I came back to the blinding speeds on the oval racetrack that is the Pokemon trading card game, I was really impressed by a lot of the cards. There were a ton of them that made me go, whoa, you can't do that in Magic, Slick. So I want to talk a bit about those cards today. Even though I haven't been back for an entire year yet, I figured right about now on the calendar would be a good time to talk about the top 10 cards that I had the most fun with my first year back in the Pokemon TCG. Honestly, it was really tough to narrow this down to just 10 entries, which is why I have an honorable mention. Usually I'd have 5, but I was actually able to restrain myself a bit and just do 1 this time around. It's Mimikyu. Yeah, when I came back to the game, I had never seen an EX Pokemon. A 2-prizer? What's that? Back in my day, because you see, I'm old, but I am quite old. But back when I used to play Pokemon, we didn't have 2-prize Pokemon that just like, you slap them down on turn 1 without having to evolve them. They just have like 200 plus HP. That's ridiculous. We didn't do that. So I felt like there was an awful lot of power creep when I came back to the game, and through all of that, Mimikyu was my buddy. You want to start with the Chenpao, an Arceus, a Miraidon, a Mew, whatever you want to do, it's going to be really tough to get through this Mimikyu. Wow, I didn't even mean to do that when I started that sentence, I promise. Nowadays, I don't lean on the little dude so much as I used to, because first I realized that Lost Zone Box is everywhere, and he does both Diddly and Squat against that deck. 2 things, but they don't really amount to much. And honestly, even when you're playing against stuff that does have things for him to lock out, there's still a bunch of plans to get around him, and they can knock him out with other, like, 1-prize Pokemon. And, there's plans against this guy against just about everything. So, again, I'm not using Mimikyu in too many of my decks nowadays, but still, this guy has bought me a lot of time in the past and frustrated a bunch of opponents that really didn't have a whole lot of plans against him in the first place. So, he does still have a special place in my heart, which is a good spot for the honorable mention. Let's get to the actual list. Why not? Number 10 is only number 10 really because of the company it keeps, but I've had a lot of fun with Baxcalibur this year, although I do have sort of a personal vendetta against Chenpao and even Palkia to an extent, but especially Chenpao. I don't even think it's a great deck or anything, I just kind of hate it. Both things can be true. But despite my personal disdain for all of his friends, I really can't deny that it is very fun to rare candy up that Baxcalibur and just start throwing around water like you're a fire hydrant. I had to come up with something quick there. How'd I do? My number 9 is Iron Valiant. We are at but the beginning of our time together, but we will have many more stories to tell before it's all said and done. I've already had a lot of fun with this card, just moving it back and forth between zones and whatnot. And once you get more than one out, it starts to get like super dangerous. You're just moving them back and forth with switches and switch carts and stuff like cross switchers. If you just want to throw all the switch stuff into your deck, you can totally do that. It's fine. And you're just going to start putting like 6 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon before you've even attack that turn. I'm just telling you stuff you already know. You've experienced this for yourself. If this card hadn't gotten printed, something like it would have taken its place on the list because I really like direct damage in Pokemon, So I've had a lot of fun with Hawlucha this year, an awful lot of fun with Radiant Alakazam, which probably would have taken this slot, Meowscarada EX, which Radiant Alakazam is in that deck, so a lot of crossover there, but one way or the other, I just like throwing damage counters on the opponent's Pokemon without even attacking. It's one of my favorite things to do, and Iron Valiant is basically the best way to do that, and I really want this to be much higher than number 9, but it kind of just came out, and a lot of the other cards on the list I've had a lot more stories with, but like I said, before it's all said and done, I'm going to have way more stories with this than I do with most of the cards on the list. That's how much I love this thing. My number 8 is Gardevoir EX. What's dawning on me about this list that's kind of funny is it is almost nothing like my Magic list for the year. I just did a video like this over on the MTG channel I run, my favorite cards of the year 2023, the ones that I had the most fun with, and almost none of them are like standard playable all-star cards. There's a couple of standard heavy hitters on the list, but it's mostly just like fringe janky cards that I had fun with. The Pokemon list, there's actually a ton of standard heavy hitters on this list. And there's honestly kind of a lot of reasons for that, but 3 of the big ones are that A lot more accessible to get the important cards on the Pokemon Live TCG app, and in paper, the cards are much, much cheaper to actually pick up on the Pokemon TCG than they are in Magic the Gathering. But I think this is the most important part. The super powerful standard all-star cards in Pokemon also tend to be very, and this is important, fun. They're very fun cards. There's almost no guarantee in Magic that the super powerful, like $60 card that everyone plays 4 of in their deck is actually going to be that fun of a card to play. It just kind of feels like a card you have to play. Whereas the, $8 cards in Pokemon that you feel like you need to pick up, and man, I'm spending a whole $8 on a card, they're also very fun to play, and Gardevoir is a really good example of that. Number 7 is Squawkabilly EX. You can really only use this guy in your first turn, and then he immediately becomes a liability for the rest of the game. You got to get him back into your hand with Penny or something like that. You got to use Collapse Stadium to get him into your discard pile so that your opponent can't take like an easy knockout on him, right? So there are definitely issues with playing Squawks in your deck, but more and more decks have started to, incorporate that 1 or even 2 Squawkabilly line over the last few months. And there's a big reason for that. At first you really just saw this in like United Wings, right? But again, it started picking up steam in like the Miraidon decks halfway through the season, and really helps decks that need to get a very good start get that good start. If you come across your Squawkabilly later in the game, you just discard it to an Ultra Ball or a Curlia or whatever you're doing, and who cares, Like any discard effect that you have, you can easily, same kind of ideas like Battle VIP Pass. You draw it any time after turn 1, you've got plenty of ways to turn it into value. And a lot of decks that play Squawks are the same way, but if you do happen to get it on turn 1, you basically get your very own wheel effect, and you will learn that I really like wheel effects. One of my favorite Magic the Gathering cards of all time is Wheel of Fortune from the very first Magic the Gathering set, right? So, and now that card costs like $150 in its lowest form, which is kind of ridiculous, but still, there's a reason. That card also costs 3 mana. Most people won't cast it until turn 3 of a game, whereas these wheel effects in Pokemon in 2023 are usable on turn 1, and I still just cannot get over that. Wheeling your hand in a game of cards in card game X, it really doesn't matter which one you're talking about, is always going to be very fun, and it still impresses me to this day that Pokemon has the ability to do it on like turn 1 for at the cost of basically no resources. It's unbelievable, and it's still fun. But hey, you know what's even more fun than just like wheeling your hand whenever you want to and drawing a fresh 7? Well, just about as fun, at least most of the time. It's just going and getting whatever card you need for any given situation. That's always great. In Magic, we have to pay a bunch of mana for that, especially in current standard. There's not a whole lot of cards that do that, and the ones they do print aren't very good because you can't cast them until like turn 4, and they take all of your resources on that turn to actually play. Whereas on Pokemon, in Pokemon, man, you can just do it once every single turn for free if you have a Pidgeot EX. This I just started throwing into every single deck, and I know that most content creators have told you not to do that anymore, and they are all 100% correct. That said, can't help myself. This is in most decks I play, especially decks that do have the ability to rare candy. If I'm rare candying for whatever reason, at least a 1/1 Pidgeot EX, like Pidgeot or Pidgey line, is going to be in the deck somewhere, because I really like being able to get whatever I want. It feels really, really good. Again, this has been in like, I don't know, 4 out of 5 decks that I've made since it came out. And that's because there's really nothing like starting a turn and being like, okay, what do I need? Let me go get exactly that. Continuing the carousel of things that you have to wait until your 4th turn and cost all of your resources to do in Magic. My number 5 is Electric Generator. If you want to ramp 2, you have to wait till turn 4 and completely tap out and leave all your shields down in order to do that in Magic the Gathering. If you want to ramp 2 in Pokemon, you can do it on turn 1 for nothing, for free. And you can do it again later on that turn if you get another EG. It's just kind of ridiculous, the power that you all have at your fingertips. I hope you appreciate it. Even if you kind of whiff and you only get 1 energy out of this card, it still feels really powerful. Any energy dropped onto the table beyond the first one that comes out of your hand on a turn feels ridiculous in a game of Pokemon, right? So, especially in the decks that Electric Generator tends to be in, they really leverage that mana ramp very well. So Electric Generator just feels literally unfair, which translates to fun. Same point with number 4, which is Charizard EX. I'm really glad. 10-year-old Dev is super happy that there's a Charizard on this list somewhere. They actually made a really good one. It's not a meme. As a matter of fact, it keeps becoming less and less of a meme as the weeks go by, and it keeps taking the top seat at more and more tournaments. This is a very serious card, and it's pretty easy to see why. Like I was just saying, I like mana acceleration, or I guess energy acceleration. you'd call it in Pokemon, right? Just a really slick card that, just like a bunch of other cards that are on this list already, like Baxcalibur and a couple of others like Gardevoir, and things that I haven't mentioned because it didn't come out this year, things like Arceus V, which is often in the same camp as this guy. Any sort of ridiculous, energy acceleration like this is not only going to be really powerful, but 9 times out of 10, it's going to be really, really fun too. And Charizard this has a really sweet attack on it, and if it does happen to die, not a big deal. It probably ramped energy onto a couple of your other dudes too, so they're ready to go. And finally, I've already said this, but I just want to say it one more time to reiterate my point. I think it's very important. So to close things out, it's a Charizard, man. We all love Charizard. I don't want to be that guy, but he's my guy. Now we're in the top 3 now, officially, and I just want to remind you, briefly, that I really like wheel effects. So what do you think one of my top 3 cards of the year was? It was Iono. Sure, it was Iono. We all had a lot of fun with this card this year, man. When I first started playing Pokemon, when I was but a ladpole, we had this card called Professor Oak. You've probably heard of the guy, at the very least, but this was just a trainer. You could play 3 Professor Oak on turn 1 if you wanted to, and often we very much did. So, can't do that anymore. Sucks. You should have played Pokemon back then. Sorry, you weren't alive? What the? Well, come on. Either way, I don't know what to say to that. It's a touche, but one way or the other. This isn't quite that, because it's a supporter. They have supporter now. We didn't have supporters when I was playing. That's how long ago it was. I think you guys have actually had supporters for quite some time now. But either way, despite the fact you can only play this one time a turn, it's still super fun to, for free. Again, put this in Magic the Gathering terms. If you've been like paying resources for your spells for the last 20 years, looking at basically a Wheel of Fortune for both players that you cast this for free. It doesn't cost anything. It just comes out of your hand. You just play it and it just happens. Like, come on. That kind of, it's unbelievable. And again, I really hope you understand how lucky you are to have the game you have. And not only can it take you from 1 card to 6 cards, but it can take your opponent from 7 cards to 2 cards, which is a really sweet thing to be able to do with it too. So this thing has tricks, man. Like, not only is it just a straight up and down wheel effect to let you refresh your hand, and that's always going to be fun no matter what, but it's also got the ability to style on them, I think some people would have said 10 years ago. So I don't know why I'm saying it now, but still, this thing has a lot of stuff to do in a game of Pokemon, aside from just the sort of baseline 4-head, 5-head, whatever mode of just like, oh, I want more cards in my hand, which is kind of how I looked at this card when I first started playing Pokemon again. But then, once other people played against you the correct way, you begin to realize the real power of it, and that's a fun card. Number 2 is a weird one, but it's Ditto. It's Ditto. It's this guy right here, actually. It's Ditto. This deck right here, one of them, I think there's actually 2 decks right next to me. Yes, there are. Is United Wings. This is probably the deck that I had the second most fun with all year. There's a Squawk ability right there. I really, really like United Wings an awful lot. And if I had to pick the best Pokemon in the deck, it's probably actually Murkrow. In a lot of ways, Ditto is the best Pokemon in that deck because Murkrow is in the deck to begin with. Basically Murkrow being in the deck and in your discard pile allows Ditto to be able to attack for just a single dark energy, which is kind of the whole secret to why Ditto is the best Pokemon in the deck. I'll always hold a special place in my heart, no matter how long I continue to play Pokemon, or no matter how many times I leave and then come back again 20 years down the road. I'm always going to remember my 2023 with Ditto and United Wings and all the fun that we had. Now, despite all the praise for Ditto and United Wings and all that, you may have noticed that I called it my second favorite deck that I played with in my first year back, and that's because Miraidon EX exists as a card, right? Not only was this the first deck that I played with when I came back, it's also the last Pokemon deck that I played with just a couple of days ago. I have had a lot of faith in this deck since like the first week I started playing Pokemon again. When I streamed Pokemon the one time I've streamed Pokemon so far, this is the deck that I played. A few months back, I made a video about the one deck that you don't respect enough in Standard. It was this deck. And then, what do you know? Over the last couple of months since I released that video, this deck keeps taking tournaments down, and even if it doesn't take the whole tournament down, it'll at least make the finals multiple times in large-scale tournaments, again, in just the last few months. Miraidon keeps gaining popularity and gaining steam, and I'm really proud of my dude, man. In my opinion, Miraidon just kind of has it all, and not only is it one of the more strategically sound decks to play in a lot of ways, it's also one of the more fun decks to play, and a lot of that is because, like I was saying, I like tutors. And when you have a card that turn one of the game lets me go set up my bench however I want to, I'm going to dig that just a little bit. Miraidon is a great card and one of the best decks in Standard, in my opinion. But that's it.